Personality.
Hello and welcome to Dead Air Live. I'm Tim Acklin, and tonight our show is on genetically engineered foods. Over the last 3 years, genetically engineered foods have gotten quite a substantial amount of press, some of it good and some of it bad, and it can be pretty overwhelming for your average consumer who doesn't know a lot about science and genetics. So tonight's show, we're going to try to work through all these details, and we have 3 guests on tonight. Our first is Linda Setchell. She's with Clean Water Action in Boston. We also have Jennifer Smith from Greenpeace, and Elliot Entis, who is CEO of Aqua Bounty Farms and AF Protein, Inc. So we'll just get started with basically what are genetically engineered foods and how do they work? I'll start with you, Elliot.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Well, genetically engineered foods actually have a long and honorable history, really beginning with the advent of farming 10,000 years ago. The only thing which has changed over the years are some of the procedures which we use to create the genetic modifications. If we did not genetically modify our foods from the very beginning of time, we would essentially be continuing to eat just simply grasses, nuts, and berries. But instead, through processes of cross-hybridization, wide crosses, and a whole bunch of other techniques which have evolved over the years, we've chosen those traits in foods, those traits in agricultural products which we value as human beings, and as a result created crops which bear very little resemblance to their original wild ancestors. Some of the obvious examples, of course, are corn, which bears virtually no resemblance at all to its ancient relative teosinte, which looks like a grass, or wheat, for example, which is really a combination of 3 grasses which are only distantly related. So what we've done over the years is progressed as technology has developed, so that originally when we modified these, we did these simply by selection or by accident. Over time, agronomists began to choose the traits that they wanted, and with a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill, managed to create better plants. But it was a lot more luck than it was skill, because the truth of the matter is, until very, very recently, our only ability to change the characteristics of food products was the ability to essentially do the same as if we were taking 2 decks of cards. Imagine each deck of cards with, let's say, 40,000 cards in it, or in this case, genes, shuffling them up together, and then these genes combined or recombined in unknown ways, and then we find those plants which we like better than others and continue to grow them. It's a very inexact process. That got a little more sophisticated back in the 1800s when we began to develop something called wide crosses, which was actually the ability to start working between species. And so we have actually a lot of foods which not only represent the same species modified over time, but actually dissimilar species which have been brought together through what was then modern science. Well, now we've come to the latest generation of this, and that is the ability to choose individual genes and place them into the plants and into animals with what we believe will be the known results, and then test for it. So what we've gone is through a process of very general kind of knowledge about plants to far more specific knowledge about genes, all of which attempt to accomplish the same thing, which is to enhance the traits of the food products that we eat in a more exact manner. Now today we call that genetic modification, but as I started to say at the very beginning of this, it's always been genetic modification. The difference is that we have a better process nowadays.
As far as differing from traditional breeding and whatnot, you now have the ability to take genes and transfer them from animals to plants, which has not ever been done before. How does that complicate this picture?
Well, that's sort of interesting. It actually has been done before. It's done every day by nature. This is how viruses live, for example, by transferring genes from plants to animals, animals to plants, animals to animals, and so on. In fact, the recent human genome study has identified somewhere in the order of several hundred genes in our bodies which effectively come from plants, are well known come from plants, and others that come from bacteria. The fact is we're all the same life force. The genetic makeup of you and me, all of us here today, is roughly 80% the same as every other animal on the planet, and 40% and 50% the same as a tomato. So we actually have or share in common a tremendous number of genes with plants, animals, and even bacteria. So the same common life force is at work. And when we transfer genes from a plant to an animal, it does not necessarily represent something which hasn't happened before. In fact, as I say, it happens all the time. But it does complicate things for people who take a look at the ethical possibilities, people who take a look at the fact that this is a more powerful technology, and there's no denying it. It is a more powerful technology, one which we can use potentially better than we can use the past technologies.
My next question is, what types of plants are being genetically engineered, and what type of genes are they being engineered with? I guess I can start with you, Linda.
So right now, about 90+% of the crops that are out on the market are 4 different crops: corn, soy, cotton, and canola. And these crops are being engineered to do one of 2 things. They're either being engineered to produce their own internal pesticide. They've been engineered with a new gene from a bacterium known as Bacillus thuringiensis, or they're being engineered to resist the spraying of herbicides. These new crops provide no benefits to consumers whatsoever. And they're basically, in the case of the crops that are engineered to produce their own internal pesticide, it means that we're actually eating pesticides, what's considered a pesticide by the Environmental Protection Agency. So unlike regular crops, where you can just sort of scrub that pesticide off, technically, with these crops, it's in every cell of that plant. So what you're eating is actually a pesticide.
I've also heard stories of tobacco plants being crossed with firefly genes so that they glow when they need water, or certain fruits that get crossed with genes that enable them to survive frost and stuff like that. Is this stuff currently in development? Is it currently being grown? Is it completely untrue? Is it? Yeah, I'll check it to you. I'm sorry.
Well, I wanted to comment, not to get off track, but on what you were saying about how genetic engineering has been going on for, millennia, and it has. The farmers, they're the best genetic engineers we've had. And the big difference between your genetic engineering and the genetic engineering that has been naturally occurring in nature is that when they have been genetically engineering corn, for example, since that's a big one, they've been working on corn that works in that environment, in that ecosystem, in that temperature, in that climate. And that's very important, because corn that may grow here in Boston won't grow, in the next state, just because of the differences in temperatures and climates and all the other ecosystem things that go along with that. And this is just natural cross-pollination. This is natural mixing of genes that they're doing. They're taking the stronger one that works. And in your case, it's just these things don't happen in nature.
Well,
and the bacteria, you're saying, yes, we do, the plants and the animals, we switch bacteria, in which we do. We all get sick, and we have bacteria in our colons, for instance, and things like that. However, if this was supposed to happen, and if it, was a necessary part of evolution, then I think it would have happened, because the bacteria, the Bt bacteria that you had mentioned, is around the corn. It's in the soil that the corn grows in, and it does use it. However, not in the amounts that you're having it be in the corn. And it poses a threat to, we don't know, to ourselves, because there is no required labeling or required testing. And it has been shown, though, to affect the monarch butterfly population. So that's a big deal. And it also is wiping out other species of corn. Because of cross-pollination, they're getting contaminated through this genetic modification. And also, we're still looking at the disadvantages of monocropping and of pesticide use, and it doesn't cut back on any of that. And monocropping, we know, is very detrimental to the soil and just many other things in general. And the pesticide use has actually increased with genetically engineered crops. The seeds, after 5 years, are kind of like ineffective, and the farmers need to go back and ask for more, and they need more fertilizers to keep that soil going because of this monocropping. So I just thought that
That's
would be
that's a mouthful. Is there
good
any way I can get
Well,
around
well, I
it?
think we'll explore some of what you were speaking about later in the show. We have definitely some more things to talk about, and those will definitely come into play. But would just also like to know, like I said, are some of these magical glowing tobacco plants,
Well,
do they really
you know,
exist?
it's like everything in life. There's a tremendous amount of urban myths. One of the great urban myths is that there's a genetically modified tomato on the marketplace which resists frost because it has a fish antifreeze protein gene in it. I've been trying to track that one down for years, and it came originally from an experiment which was done indoors, and then somebody decided that this was a terrific media story, as a lot of these stories grow over time. And the short answer is no. There are lots of lab experiments. There are certainly lab experiments in which fluorescent genes, green fluorescent, for example, is used as a laboratory tool. It's very common. It's nothing to do, however, with crops that we use or crops that we eat or anything like that. It's like any one of a number of markers which are used by scientists for various purposes, which have little, if anything, to do with agricultural biotechnology. If I could expand for just a moment, though, on just one aspect of something that Jennifer said, this issue about natural selection kind of playing the great role in genetic modification over eons is simply not true. That may have been true quite a long time ago, originally, when people simply looked for traits and then tried to breed them through. But that changed dramatically when we started to breed things very, very specifically, not to be natural. I'll give you a good example. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I guess now, well, no, even a little longer, 50 years ago, there was a lubricant which was used on shipboards, totally toxic to human beings. It's also a plasticizer. If I told you that I could genetically modify that for you to use in food, wouldn't you believe that that's a problem? Would you believe that would be a difficult thing, and that you'd be a little leery of that, I think, right?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if I told you that I could transform a plant that produces a toxic oil used as a ship lubricant
Okay.
into an edible oil, would that concern you?
Well,
Might.
it might, yeah.
Yeah, well, that oil is canola. And it was transformed not through genetic engineering that we're talking about here tonight, but it was transformed through prior technologies in which a toxic gene which was present in the canola was bred out of it, and not very naturally either. So we've used these techniques.
How
and
not
simply,
very naturally, I
it's
wonder?
through wide crosses in which grafts occur which would never occur in nature. I'll give you a good example, another one in my own area, which is fish. There's a very popular fish called a sunshine bass. It goes under various names. It's a white fish. And it's otherwise known as a domesticated striped bass. It's a cross between a saltwater striped bass and a freshwater bass, white bass, which never have met in nature and are not very well related to each other. And yet that product is being sold on the market today, not through the use of genetic engineering in the context of tonight's talk, but through the genetic engineering of farmers who figured out that they could mix the genetics through other methods, much more inexact than we could do otherwise. But, you know, there's other examples.
Can I interject for a second? Because
Sure.
we're talking about this whole genetic engineering process, and we haven't really delved into actually how this is working. And so,
Well,
just for a
Yeah, well, that's our next topic of discussion. I think are what are the risks behind this? Are there risks? How do we monitor and test for potential effects on humans and the environment? And who is currently testing for this? And what kind of results have they been getting? I guess I can start that with you if you'd like, Jennifer, or either one.
Yeah, so Elliot mentioned earlier that genetic engineering is a more precise way to make crosses in nature or whatever we're doing here. So, but that's not exactly a true statement. When they're genetically engineering food, they use a couple of different methods, and one method is the use of a gene gun. So they take a gene from one organism, for example, the bacteria gene from the Bacillus thuringiensis, and they stick it on a little gold or tungsten ball, and they stick it in this gun, and they shoot it at a petri dish full of corn cells. What they're hoping is that basically that little gold ball is going to blast through the cell wall of those little cells, and that there's some other stuff attached to this little gold ball, which I won't go into, that's going to enable this new gene to land on the corn DNA strand. But they can't pinpoint exactly where on the DNA strand that new gene is going to land. And this is where your health risks come in. And this is also where your environmental risks come in. Because that new gene is going to interact with those other genes on that DNA strand. And so in that interaction process, you can create new food allergens. When your genes code for one of two things, they either code for proteins or enzymes. When you have a food allergen, what you're allergic to in a food is that protein, a certain protein that food is emitting. So by introducing these new genes into the food supply, we're also introducing new proteins. And these new proteins can cause new food allergens. In addition to that, these new genes that are inserted into the food supply can also turn on genes that either may be dormant or may only work in a certain part of the plant. So for example, this is purely hypothetical, but say like you engineered a plant from the nightshade family, so that would be an eggplant, a tomato, or a tomato. And nightshades they're a toxic plant. They're known as a toxic plant because there's a toxin either in the leaves or the roots or something like that, but it doesn't come out in the fruit. So what happens when you engineer this plant and that gene lands next to that little toxin-oriented gene, and you turn it on and it ends up in the fruit? And what happens if somebody's not paying attention and misses that, and we end up with that in our food supply? And so we don't have a regulatory system set up in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. Right now, none of the genetically engineered products out on the market are being safety tested by the federal government. They're not being safety tested by the Food and Drug Administration. They're not being safety tested by the Environmental Protection Agency. And they're not being safety tested by the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Tim, may I interject?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
I rarely go to the position of saying that somebody just uttered a total and 100% falsehood, but Linda, I have to say that this is the case. There is not a single genetically modified food which has not undergone extensive testing by the Food and Drug Administration, which is mandatory, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They are regulated under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. They are regulated under the Toxin Act. They are regulated by several other acts, all of which exist under the coordinated framework. It is simply an untruth to have said to the public that these foods are not regulated. The average, excuse me, I would like to finish. I did not interrupt you. It takes roughly 9 years for a product to go from the laboratory to the field to the consumer, during which period of time it is tested for every hormone analysis, it is tested for protein analysis, it is tested for nutrients, it is tested for allergenicity. I know this because this is what our company has to do also. And we don't do it ourselves. We give this out to independent laboratories with absolutely no stake, no monetary stake in the outcome. They're paid in advance, and they have nothing to do with whether results are up or down. Now, you can decry this system, but let's tell the truth about what the system actually does. Now, at this stage of the game, virtually every major health organization worldwide, and that includes the World Health Organization, that includes the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the FDA, OECD, every organization of major medical, health, or other initiative has come out in favor of genetically modified foods and said that there is no evidence of allergenicity. I'm sorry, I'm going to finish. No evidence of allergenicity in any product which has yet been brought out. And in fact, there have been both demonstrated, not hypothetical, environmental benefits. Contrary to what you said, Jennifer, I have to tell you that the amount of pesticides used has gone down by 46 million pounds in the United States last year in genetically modified crops. And not one single instance of illness. So what we have is demonstrated benefits against hypothetical problems. And when I take a look at the risk-benefit analysis, I take a look very carefully and I say, let's at least argue, number one, on the basis of what we can see in the way of benefits and what we can see in the way of risk. And number two, let's not make up stories about what the regulatory agencies do or don't do.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, I'll let you
Okay, so your particular genetically engineered fish is actually being regulated a little bit more closely because it's a fish product and other agencies need to be involved in this. This has not happened with the products that are currently out on the market.
It's not true. You're simply not telling the truth.
People can go read the regulations for themselves. It's stated on the FDA website, it's stated on the EPA website and the USDA website. The FDA website clearly states that there is a voluntary process for submitting safety testing data. Voluntary, it's not mandatory. I don't know how much clearer that is. It's on the FDA website, fda.gov.
The policy of voluntarism versus mandatory was changed several years ago.
I'm not finished. You've dominated the conversation this entire time. The second thing that is out there is the fact that the British Medical Association came out in 1998 or 1999 saying that they had very distinct concerns about the health risks associated with genetically engineered food, including the transference of antibiotic resistance to humans because they use antibiotic resistance genes during the genetic engineering process. Just last week, a study came out saying that DNA, contrary to what the biotech industry says, does not break down in the small intestine and the stomach. I went through and I read the whole story. And granted, the initial study was done on 2 different populations. One of the populations, their contents of their stomach came out after the small intestine. The other population, it didn't come out until the end. In the first population, the DNA was still intact after it passed through the small intestine. There's bacteria in the small intestine that can pick up those antibiotic resistance marker genes. This is all coming out of Britain by very established scientists who are very concerned about what's going on with genetically engineered food. I would also say that there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists who've expressed deep concerns about what's going on in Mexico with the contamination of the Center for Genetic Corn Diversity down there, which happened more recently last year. So, and in addition to that, in this country, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is currently headed by Ann Veneman, who's the former CEO of Calgen, a company which put the first genetically engineered tomato out on the market. The deputy director of the Environmental Protection Agency is Linda Fisher. She's a former head of lobbying for Monsanto, which is the largest biotechnology corporation in the world. So we clearly have a government that is compromised by corporate influence, as we've seen with the Enron scandal, as we've seen with all these other scandals. The same is true with genetically engineered food. We need to clean out our federal agencies. We need to instill scientists who do not have an interest in this technology moving forward. And then we can talk about real science, because right now we can't talk about the fairness and the accuracy of the federal government, because it's not on our side right now, because it's not owned by us, it's not controlled by us.
I'd just like to add to that.
I would like to just try to direct it more towards, I think we've touched on the human effects. I'd like to just, how these organisms affect the environment around them, and if you'd like to answer that.
Okay, well, just going back to the pesticide use, I won't be so antagonistic as to say that you have lied. However, I think you're just a little bit misinformed. At first, the pesticide use does decrease, and the yields do increase. That's proven. However, after 5 years, that drastically goes down, and the farmers keep having to buy more and more pesticides and keep having to buy these more and more seeds, and they keep having to fertilize their land. So, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. And then the pesticides, it's just you make these Roundup-ready soybeans, right? So they're good we're still spraying herbicides around, and there's a dead zone out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico from all the runoff from the plain states, from the pesticide use. So whether it decreases it or not, we're still trying to control nature. And then we're doing this homogenization of nature also, because we're using one seed. We're using this genetically modified seed. And the pollen drift that just, drifts and contaminates these other crops. And in Mexico, like she was saying, there's just, the genetic diversity is just being destroyed, absolutely. And not just in Mexico, just everywhere. We've lost 3/4 of the genetic diversity within the past 100 years even. And it's just shocking.
If you're talking about and attacking agriculture in general, which seems to be what...
I'm not attacking agriculture.
Well, but it seems that what your argument is,
agriculture.
your argument seems to be against agriculture, because all agriculture...
Industrial agriculture.
Well, all agriculture is based on monoculture.
Large scale. No, it is not. Organic farming, small farms.
Yeah.
Well, just,
One of the things which I think we should bear in mind, and let's step back for a minute and take a look at the big picture here. The amount of food produced at the turn of the century, 1900 America, took 13 farmers to produce. which we can now produce using one farmer. That's one of the benefits of modern agriculture, which I'm not here to give the biblical stories. However, what I do have to point out is that modern agriculture developed basically as a result of the deficiencies of what we would call organic agriculture. The fact of the matter is that we produce more food, more healthy food for more people on the planet today than has ever been produced in the past. And that's a result of modern agriculture, whether you like it or you don't like it. The fact of the matter is that organic farming, and organic farmers would not disagree with this, requires more land, produces less per acre, and also uses pesticides and herbicides, including BT. But the real issue here is let's try and separate out some of the issues, because we're getting them all balled up together. The other part of the big picture, is, and I have to look at this, are we better off today than we were 100 years ago? Do we live longer? Do we live shorter lives? Do we spend more time in peasant labor or less time in peasant labor? And you know, the only people who love peasant labor are people who have never done it, I have to tell you.
I've done it, and I enjoy farming.
That's terrific, but I think that for the vast majority of the world's population, they would prefer to avoid it. And I think that today what we have is if you're going to attack agriculture as a whole unit, that's fine. I'm not against organic farming. Organic farming has its place. I have nothing against it whatsoever. I also think it's unrealistic simply to rely on that to feed a growing world population, which is going to be doubling again in the next 25 years. So we're talking about ever-increasing amounts of food. If I may, I do want to point out...
Let me just,
Go ahead.
I'll give you, I want to ask one more question, and when we're going to talk about the benefits, and you can
we just
show this.
enlighten others?
You want to
Okay.
say one more thing, and
Sure.
I'm going to ask Elliot a question.
Well, okay, 100 years ago also, okay, we won't even go there, but organic farming, and it's been proven by the FDA even that smaller farms per unit acre have higher yields. 27 acres or less, 10 times higher. 4 acres, 100 times higher. And this is proven by the FDA.
Excuse me? The
This is
FDA has nothing to
proven.
do with acreage.
It's the U.S. Department of
Yes,
Agriculture.
USDA,
And
excuse
it
me.
has 100 times more yield per acre on a small farm than a
Yeah,
large farm?
because you
I would
can-
defy you to prove that.
It's
can get my book
actually,
out.
and
I'll
it's
show
in
you.
U.S. Department of Agriculture
Yeah.
Okay.
documents. And the reason for this is on a small farm, you plant crops in groupings, so they support each other. This is how farmers around the world do agriculture, and this is how they grow food for their families, for their communities, and it is much more productive because after you plow something under at the middle of the growing season, you can go back and plant something else there, and so you have more food per acre on a smaller plantation where you can go in and hand till or use hand tools to go in and deal with it, or small tractors and things like that. This is a proven fact. It's a fact that's accepted by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. The other thing that's happening, let's go back a second to this whole industrial agriculture discussion that we were having, and about world hunger and about how our food is produced. There was such a thing as the Green Revolution in the 70s, and that's when industrial agriculture was exported to developing countries through the International Monetary Fund and other international institutions. And basically what happened is they went to these developing countries. They said for the first couple of years, the farmers could have all this new technology for free. What new technology are we talking about? We're talking about chemical pesticides, chemical herbicides, chemical fertilizers, hybridized seeds, and irrigation. And they were told, all these farmers were told to grow export crops. And so these farmers went out, they used the technology, they grew the crops. Meanwhile, in the US, the farmers were using the same technology, growing the same crops, and it did increase yields. But at the same time, the market price for all of these crops dropped dramatically. But the US has subsidies, so the US bought up the surplus here in this country and helped the farmers out. In India and other countries, those farmers went under. And where did the farmers go? They lost their land and they went into the cities. So we've seen a huge increase in urban poverty since the mid-1970s due to this green revolution. And in fact, if you go back and look at hunger statistics for every country in this world, and you exclude China, who did not adopt this technology and this system fully, world hunger actually increased 11% with the introduction of Green Revolution technologies. So the benefits of industrial agriculture are just not there in terms of feeding the world or improving, better food for people. People want to be able to have their own land and grow their own food, especially in developing countries.
Okay. I think what we'll do is now we'll talk about some of the benefits. Would genetically engineered crops benefit small farmers in third world countries that?
It's scale neutral. Genetically engineered seed is totally scale neutral. If you have a seed which is engineered to eliminate pesticides or herbicides, or for example to produce vitamin A to cure some of the blindness problems which exist, it doesn't matter whether you're planting 1 acre or 1,000 acres. That's one of the benefits. Clearly, we've got a situation where farmers, as we all agree, are not stupid. Farmers will use seeds that will benefit them.
They're
If
trapped.
a farmer, they're not trapped. They have many
They
sources
are
of
trapped.
seeds.
I've talked to many farmers.
And so have I. And I've actually even come from an organic conference recently in which the discussion centered around how we meet between organic farming and some of the genetically modified crops.
The
because some of
Organic
them,
Trade Association's
Anyways.
Conference.
in
That's not
any
really a
event-
farmer's
In
conference.
any event, you're asking some of the benefits, Tim. And what we see as the benefits are the potential here, again, for farmers to utilize seed without having to use pesticides. And despite the statement before, the Council on Agricultural Science and Technology recently came out with this report, and I do have to disagree with you. 46 million pounds less pesticides used last year. There was no evidence for an increase in the use of pesticides or herbicides. It's simply no empirical evidence. Stepping back, benefits, there is not one illness that has ever been associated with the use of genetically modified plants or crops in any sort. Every major organization, environmental organization, mainstream, I have to say, as well as others, has come out and said that there is no additional environmental damage. In fact, environmentally speaking, these crops are safer. That's the evidence that we have. We do not have the evidence for the hypothetical problems. We do have the evidence for the benefits.
Okay, if I could just interject for 1 minute. We have a phone call that we'd like to take. Hello? 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 We lost him? Hello? All right. Well, I apologize for that. I guess we lost the caller. If you want to continue, I guess my question, I guess, as far as benefits go, I guess the next thing I would actually like to discuss is more for the environment. I know this talk. You say that it lessens pesticides and lessens herbicides, and you guys are saying that.
Well, I'm
that
looking at
such-
statistics. I'm
such
quoting from the
evidence.
National Center for Food and Agricultural Policy. I'm quoting from CAST. I'm quoting from other sources which have taken serious looks at this in the past couple of years. Quote, currently commercialized biotech-derived soybean, corn, cotton crops yield environmental benefits. Critical analysis indicates a reduction in the use of pesticides and herbicides. I mean, I'm quoting from recognized sources that are not industry-driven, that presumably are science-based, and I have to tell you that I can supplement that with my own conversations with people in industry. I am in industry, and I have talked with people in DuPont and Dow and other producers of these chemicals, and they will tell you quite candidly that their market for herbicide and pesticides is simply growing smaller all the time. If you talk to an executive of any of those firms, they will tell you that they are concerned for their future. And as a result, quite honestly, they're looking to find ways to get into genetic modified plants because the future of herbicides and pesticides is very, very limited as far as they're concerned.
I
They
would
see
have
that
to
writing on the wall.
Totally
disagree.
disagree.
Yeah, Monsanto actually genetically engineered Roundup Ready soybeans so they could hang on to the patent for the chemical Roundup Ready, which was the world's best-selling herbicide. And so they engineered soybeans and canola plants to be resistant to Roundup Ready. And what this enables farmers to do is to go out and spray Roundup Ready whenever they want to. Previously, they could only spray it during certain times of the plant's life cycle. This enables them to go out and spray it whenever they want. a grocery store, actually, supermarket chain in England. They had a food scientist on staff. He went out and tested soy-based products to see what the herbicide content was of genetically engineered soy products versus non-genetically engineered soy products. And they found that the herbicide content of the genetically engineered soy products was much higher, statistically higher than the herbicide content of the non-genetically engineered products. And so, you know, maybe with the plants that are being engineered to produce their own pesticides, so you're not spraying pesticides on them, yeah, you might see a reduction in pesticides, but you're not seeing a reduction in herbicides. But on the other hand, you're eating something that's considered a pesticide. Do you want to eat something that's considered a pesticide? I don't.
This is junk science. I mean, the fact is that that's digested and has no effect on the human body, and it's been known for years. You have
Actually,
to
going back
show
to the
me
human
evidence-
health.
If I could just-
Show me the evidence of one illness. There are no
The food
illnesses
allergens,
associated.
food allergies
All
from
right,
Starling.
1 second. Let's just, I think we got our caller back. I apologize for interrupting. Let's try this again. Hello?
Hi, I have
Hello?
a question.
Okay, can you, what's your name?
My name is Bobby.
Bobby.
On a lighter note,
Okay.
not being too, I'm 43 educated, I understand the environment, and et cetera. I just have one basic question. I'm going to hang up afterwards. How come in Connecticut and New Jersey they can grow miles and miles of sod, cut it, roll it up, people can buy it and put it on their back lawns or front lawns to have a greener thing? Why can't they grow like cabbage or cucumbers or things like that? I'm just curious, and we're talking, you might know, we're talking miles and miles of sod that gets, and they keep on doing it, reproduce it every year. I'm going to hang up,
Okay.
and I want a good argument or a definitive answer out of the four of you. All right?
Thank you, Bobby.
you, sir.
Take
Good
care.
man, woman. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Jennifer?
I wonder, the sod,
Well, everyone's got to have a green lawn,
Yeah.
I guess that kind of, you know, on a larger scale, I mean, is it a problem with our governmental system? Is it capitalism? Is it that, you know, in America here, we have to go through a supermarket with just stock shelves, and, you know, we want to have every type of product available to us at any time of day? Is it something that, you know, Americans in general have to change their lifestyles to, you know, accommodate, like you say, smaller farms that produce more food as opposed to this industrial agriculture, which are producing surpluses of food that isn't being properly distributed in areas of the world that need it.
well, I think we need to be more socially responsible when we choose the foods that we eat, because what we've done with industrial agriculture is we've gone into other countries, and we've done it in our own country also, but we'll just speak of other countries right now. We've gone in there and we've bought up the land, and then, or we'll give them free things, the free seeds, the free pesticides, free herbicides, and to start monocropping. And so this is what they do. And then they export this to the United States. So we eat. And what happens is the people that were growing food for themselves, they're no longer growing food for themselves. So although there is this surplus of food, these people still aren't eating because the food that they're making, they're sending to us. So they're...
The other thing
Yeah.
that's going on with the
Actually, I'd just like
Yes.
to, I mean, do you think it's a lifestyle change requirement of Americans, or do you think we can continue to go on and we should expect these things from the modern world, and we should
I
expect
think-
them in parts of
I think that we have to continue to rely on modern agriculture to supply most of our food needs. I think that there's room for both the small local farmer, the organic farmer, as well as for the modern agricultural farmer. I think that we need both. They both serve purposes. It's been shown that there's certainly no health difference between these foods, and that's gone over and over again. There may or may not be any environmental differences between them. There's evidence on both sides which indicate that there are dangers both from organic farming as well as from monocropping. Agriculture by definition, by the way, is monocropping. I think that the biggest problem that we face today in the world, however, is the problem of undersupply of food, whether you think it's a distribution problem or whether you think it's an actual production problem for the third world. We don't suffer from this problem. Europe doesn't suffer from this problem. Clearly, the economic situation of the world is such that it argues against a distribution of food easily to places in Africa and other places. I mean, there's an estimate that 24,000 people die per day of starvation. This is an appalling statistic. There's no question about it. By the same token, I don't see that the wealthy of the planet are about to start redistributing their wealth wholesale to the poor of the planet.
So
So
why
I
is that
think what the better answer is, the better answer here is to enable people in these countries to produce their own food more cheaply and better and more easily. I think that in the long run, that avoids a kind of a neo-colonialism which we can find ourselves in a trap of doing. So that's of concern, and I think that when we step back and we look at that big picture, it's not an all or nothing scheme. We do have to mix and match what's appropriate on the local level as well as on the global level.
Okay. What I want to do right now is go to some video footage of a all right. So we'll take one quick phone call and then we'll go to the video. Hello?
Oh.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
This is Thomas.
Hello, Thomas. How are you?
I'm good. I want to know how many farmers have stopped farming in the past few years in the United States.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I'd like to know how many farmers have stopped farming in the past few years in the United States.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody know?
At the turn of the century, we had about 13,000 farmers, so 1900, sorry. I'm still not used to this new century yet. 1900, we had 13 million farmers in this country. Today, we have less than 2 million, and it's shrinking every day. One of the dirty little secrets of American agriculture is the fact that small farmers who are losing their farms due to low commodity prices, not being able to pay for the inputs because the prices that they're getting from ConAgra, ADM, and whatever the other one is, are not enough to pay for their mortgages on their farms. They're actually committing suicide. There's a huge suicide rate amongst American farmers in this country because they're not getting enough for their food. So where is that money going? That money is going to Kellogg's, to Kraft, to Heinz, to all those middlemen people. It's also going to ConAgra, to ADM, Supermarket to the World. Anybody ever recognize those on NPR? So it's all going to the middlemen, and the farmers aren't getting that. So while our supermarket prices go up, you know, the farmers are not seeing any of that money, and they're getting hurt as a result of it, and they're going out of business. You also have development issues encroaching, so it's better for a farmer to sell their land for development rather than to sell it to another farmer.
Okay. I think before we run out of time, we're going to go to this videotape. It was a protest out in front of a Star Market on Boylston Street in the Back Bay area that happened about around 10 o'clock this morning. So if you guys want to roll the tape.
To be a leader and to remove these. Your parent company has already removed these products from the shelves in Britain, and all we're asking is for the same treatment here. These products are...
Genetic engineering is the largest uncontrolled experiment in the history of modern agriculture, and we are all guinea pigs in their experiment. We say if biotechnology is so safe, why won't they label it? We believe this is genetic contamination, and we want it off the shelves of Shaw's now. At this point, 60%.
Greenpeace are out here today to urge Shaw's and Star Market to remove genetically engineered ingredients from their products. Genetically engineered food has not been safety tested by the federal government, nor is it labeled. American customers are being duped in a genetic experiment that they have no idea is taking place. Genetically engineered food enables more cancer-causing pesticides and herbicides to be sprayed on crops. This exposes customers to extreme levels of pesticides, cancer-causing pesticides and herbicides. In addition to that, through the genetic engineering process, you can create new food allergens. We already have Many people in this country already have severe food allergies. We don't want to add new food allergies to our food supply. Finally, genetically engineered food poses major threats to the environment, including genetic contamination.
We expect to send a strong message to the store manager and also the CEO of Shaw's and Star Market that customers don't want genetically engineered food in their store products. Genetically engineered food is untested, unlabeled, and unwanted by the public and poses a serious health crisis.
This is a non-violent protest. Genetically engineered foods are a biohazard. It's a dangerous double standard. The Shaw's parent company has removed genetically engineered foods from all of their store brand products.
We're educating the public, we're flyering, we're just sending a very strong message. We went in and did a toxic food tour, explaining all the different types of products that are on the shelves. Again, to send a very strong message that we don't want these products sold on our stores.
They need to remove these products, the genetically engineered products, from their store brands, and we're calling on them today to do that. They have shown that they can do this in Britain. There are no genetically engineered foods in Shaw's brand products in Britain, and we are asking for equal treatment. There is a danger
From their store brand. It's been a processed foods in the United States.
they've already done in Britain by removing genetically engineered foods from their store brand. We're calling on them to do the same thing in the United States.
Shaw's and Star Market sells genetically engineered food without people knowing it. We want them to remove it from the shelves.
Genetic engineering is a dangerous new technology that takes the genes from one organism and puts it into another. They're taking genes out of deep sea fish and putting it into strawberries. They're taking fungicidal genes and bacteria and putting in corn and potatoes. BT potatoes, which are on sale here at your Shaw's supermarket, are a registered pesticide. That means it's toxic to eat. So we call upon Shaw's to get genetically engineered ingredients off their shelves. They've done it in the UK. Why can't they do it here? We demand that Shaw's take action to protect public health risks.
Of their store brands being poison because they recognize these products are on. Calling on Shaw's and Star Market to be a leader.
We call upon Shaw's
They have a great opportunity here to show that they care about their consumers. Shaw's and Star Markets can show that they care about consumers, about the public, by removing all genetically engineered foods from their store brand products. That contain genetically engineered foods.
Nor is it labeled. American customers are being duped in a genetic experiment that they have no idea is taking place. Shaw's brand products, including Shaw's brand corn chips, Shaw's brand pancake mix, Shaw's brand corn puffs, have all tested positive for genetically engineered ingredients.
Hi, welcome back to Dead or Alive. Tonight's show is, we're focusing on genetically engineered foods, and the footage you just saw was of a Greenpeace protest outside of a Star Market on Boylston Street in the Back Bay. We're going to go back to Elliot Entis, who is the CEO of AF Protein Incorporated and Aqua Bounty Farms, and he has some products that he would like to talk about.
You know, the world of food and food production is a complex world. You know, it's well recognized that we in the United States do have probably the safest food supply on the planet. We've not suffered from some of the problems which the Europeans have suffered from in recent years, most notably mad cow disease. And that's primarily because we have an agency such as the Food and Drug Administration, which is well and thoroughly tested in these areas and is well believed. Nevertheless, with all of the talk about genetic modification and with the talk about how this is radically new and with what we just saw there in these protests, I'd kind of like to bring a couple of items to the attention of our audience. This is organic pasta coming from Italy, made with durum semolina, made from wheat. The wheat in this product, as virtually all the wheat in Italy, comes from seeds which were irradiated back in the 1950s. Now, nothing produces greater changes in DNA than irradiation. Irradiation destroys DNA, it alters it, it mutates it. And what they did back in the 1950s, and we did it here in this country too, is we undertook experiments with 1,700 different crops, seeds, and produced the irradiated versions, chose what was best and used it. Am I saying this is unsafe? It's not unsafe. In fact, history proves it's not unsafe. The fact is, however, that with this product, as well as with rice, and this is an organic rice called Cal Rose, which is extensively used, both products of a process of irradiation mutagenesis, which changes DNA far more than any single genetic experiment has been done since on food. And the last point on food and food safety, common potato. If I tried to get this common potato approved by the FDA, saying that it was the result of genetic modification, it would not be approved. Why? Potatoes contain in their skin glycoalkaloids, a known toxin. Now, admittedly, it's in small trace elements in this particular variety of potatoes, although some that have been bred, by the way, have contained far greater amounts of it. It would contain that toxin. It could not get past the FDA. By the way, neither could peanuts, nor could most shellfish, because they have allergens in them. We have allergens in our food supply, naturally speaking. Not everything that's natural, by the way, is good for us. The fact is that the genetically modified foods are the most tested foods on the surface of our planet. We know more about them than we know about any of the wild cultivars or other items that have been produced over the thousands of years.
Okay. I think what we should discuss now is labeling. I know that it's a pretty hot topic right now, and I think as a consumer, you know, there's been polls taken, and you know, people feel that they, you know, I think it was 20% of people polled knew that they had eaten genetic and engineered foods, and it was a little bit over, I think it was around 65 said that they hadn't eaten genetic foods, when in actuality they had. And they were asked further questions, and they said that, you know, they felt deceived that they didn't know about this, and that they felt that they would be more supportive of the industry if they were told what they were being fed. And it seems to be that the consumers are looking for labeling. And, you know, I guess my question to you is, you know, are you against it? Do you think it's a...
No, this is an interesting question. It's probably the most vexing question which faces the industry. I actually happen to have an opinion which differs somewhat from many in the industry, and that is I'm in favor of labeling. I'm in favor of voluntary labeling. I intend to label our product. That's because I believe it has a market benefit, and I want people to know what the benefits are. I certainly know why a lot of the food industry is against labeling. The problem with labeling was borne out in the United Kingdom a couple of years ago, when as soon as genetically modified labels came onto the initial product, which were tomatoes, it actually didn't create a stir, it didn't change any of the sales. However, when one of the other supermarket chains, in this case Iceland, decided that they could use a marketing ploy here and come out with GMO-free, and they were the first ones to do this, and claim that genetically modified was unsafe, it gains a market advantage. So what you see here is a kind of competition which occurs in which the implication is that labeling GM foods will indicate that they're unsafe and it will be used by other marketeers. It's certainly something which I know for a fact, and everybody here will agree with, is what the environmental and other organizations want to see corporations do, not because of consumer information. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to use it to identify products to try and destroy them, as we just saw on the screen, by either pressure politics or outright terrorist kind of activities, which we just saw here today.
I
And I've been the
object to
victim of
that. That is
I'm not a-
completely uncalled for.
In any event,
Completely uncalled for.
I think that the issue is that labeling remains a tough issue. I believe in it. I think that it's something which I want to have done for my company. I can understand why a lot of food concerns say, listen, we have a process here in the United States. It's a set rule. We label product. We do not label process. Product is the end result. A can of tomatoes, you label the tomato. Do you label how the tomatoes got there? Do you label all the pesticides that went into it? Do you label the guy who inspected it? Those are processes. Do we label the fact that it was canned in a certain way? If we labeled process such as genetic modification, advanced hybridization, wide crosses, etc., pretty soon the label's going to be bigger than the can. So the choice is not to label process in the United States, and always has been that. We do label the actual product.
I would like to respond in that, you know, poll after poll shows that 90+% of the American public wants their genetically engineered food to be labeled, processed product, whatever. We live in a free country. People want labels. The FDA needs to step up to the plate and start labeling it. Elliot said that he wanted voluntary labeling. We have voluntary labeling. Any company can go out there and label their genetically engineered food if they want to right now. They're just not willing to do it. And so we as consumers need to go to our supermarkets. We need to talk to our store managers. We need to say, I want labels on genetically engineered food, or I don't want genetically engineered food, and I want you to do something about it. That's the only way anything's going to change in this country. If regular people don't get up off their couches and go and talk to their supermarket managers, write letters to Kraft, write letters to Heinz, whoever you want to, you're going to be eating genetically engineered food. And you know, you're part of one of the largest experiments that's ever been unleashed in the world.
All right, well, I think we're almost out of time here. I just want to thank everyone for coming on. I think it was a pretty good show. A little heated at moments, but that always
Lively.
makes lively. Yes, it makes for a good show. And thank you guys all very much for coming out. I
Cool.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.